as we go through some of these. We'll have an opportunity as we go through it to kind of cover some questions at the end of each sort of section. But like I said, if you have any questions, just write them down and we'll try and cover them at the end. So I think one of the questions that I get all the time is, why would you specialize and be just a coach working on the short game? Like there's so much more to this. And like I said before, for me, I thought to really advance my career, I needed to specialize a little bit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an area that I think is a little bit underutilized in terms of most golf pros' business, which is coaching the short game. And a lot of this, will come back to the players that come to you, like they will only really think about driver or irons, and full swing. They're not really thinking that much about their short game. But as golf pros, we kind of have to educate them and say, hey, if the ultimate goal is to get better and to score lower, here's the quickest way I think we can get it done, either through chipping, pitching, or even putting. And when I started kind of telling people about this here, it was amazing because my business was busy already teaching full swing. And then I started adding the short game into it. And instantly it was tripling. So instead of someone coming for, 3 or 4 sessions, now they're signing up for 12 sessions because we've had to cover, full swing, drivers, chipping, bunkers, on course, and putting, so there's a chance for a lot of people, if you do want to expand your business and into this area, this is one of the biggest things that I think you can do. So one of the things that I learned at the beginning was that I would have people coming in. I've decided I'm going to teach short game. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I'm going to do. So I said, okay, come on ahead. We'll give you a lesson. So I started teaching, a couple of lessons. They're like, oh yeah, I'll come for a chipping lesson. So people were coming for a chipping lesson, and I was newer at it at that time. So I really just didn't know what way to market it. So I was always just saying, okay, yeah. So they'll come for a chipping lesson. I'd have them chipping it good. And then they were just kind of moving on. They, okay, what's next? Okay, we do a putting lesson next week. Okay, we did a putting lesson. Okay, fine. So that was kind of going on for a little bit, especially the first season, where I was teaching short game, but not that much, not regularly teaching it. I was just sort of full swing most of the time and then kind of filling in with the short game. So as I was starting to get a bit frustrated with this here, I was like, well, what's really going on here? Why can't I get them to do more lessons? They only want to do one lesson. I realized that I was just asking them the wrong question. And, I was talking about short game. The question I should have been asking them and that I asked them now is, what shot do you struggle with on the golf course? So they'll often say, well, I really struggle getting out of the bunkers, or there's hole number 6, that hill, I'm always there and I just can't seem to hit that shot. I don't know what to do. So what we do is we make a list. We make a list of, and they use their golf course or the golf course they play most often, a list of the shots that we need to be able to sort of work with them on. And we both agree, okay, here's the shots that you want to learn. This is the most important down to the least important. Okay, why don't we go about learning those? And then we'll dive in deeper and we'll say, okay, well, here's the technique that you would need for this shot. Here's some of the do's and don'ts of this shot. Here's what you need to do with your club face. This is how the ball will react. And that one shot then becomes one full lesson, maybe 2, maybe 3 lessons, even just for that one shot. So now you're able to expand it out so much. And the people have to get used to, that's the way we teach the short game. We don't teach it as, oh, I went for a chipping lesson. People will then say, oh, I learned this really cool shot. It's called blah, blah, blah. And you can make up whatever you want, or I learned this really cool shot that works for number 6 hole. And I can hit this shot now more often and I feel amazing. And then more often what happens, they come back and say, hey, this one on number 12, I really struggle with this. What should I be doing here? And then it just keeps building and building and building. So it's an amazing way to build a really strong business. around just that one area. And then obviously the big thing is taking people out onto the golf course and looking at that situation after you've gone and done your practice and seeing how they manage that actual spot, because most people don't have facilities that simulate all the shots that we need on the golf course. So this is a perfect option for us. So when people are asking you for short game, this is my opinion, make sure that you talk about the shots that they need. And once you've got the shots that they need, then you can go ahead out onto the green and work on it. And they will definitely come back and work on a lot more. So one of the things that helped me setting up when I was starting out was I would set up a putting course. So I had little discs, just little small discs, and they just had a little arrow on them. Like you could use anything. You could use a piece of paper and just put a number on it. So I set out a putting course, and then I put up a little piece of paper and a box, and you just put your name on it and put it into the box. And at the end of the day, we just tallied it up and put, here's the leaderboard for the putting contest. Here's the leaderboard for the short game course. So then more people were more interested in looking at putting and looking at short game, and the members were starting to talk with each other and saying, oh, I did that the other day. I scored a 32. And you're like, oh, wow, I'm a 25. So then that in their brain right away goes, wow, my short game is not as good as some of these other players. I need to probably go and work on this. So this then becomes your marketing. You don't even have to tell people, but people are recognizing and they know that you're behind this initiative that's going to actually help them improve. So this was really, really helpful for me. So I had people doing this all the time. We still run these little putting courses and short game and putting short game courses, and we change it from level of difficulty. So from easy, to 5 out of 10 to, by the way, this one's a 9 out of 10, very difficult, but go ahead, but your score is going to be much higher. So that's been super fun and fantastic for marketing that part of the business. So we often think that in a lesson, or certainly, I have thought at the beginning when I was teaching people that it was all about information. Like it was information, because the information was sort of what people were paying for, But I realized that most people really needed the training. They needed you to be there on site with them as they were training. So what I did is I set up a bunch of days that if you signed up for a bigger package, the training was included. But if you didn't sign up for that, people could drop into the training. No different than if you were going to like a gym class or a spin class. People would come in and you would just be taken through a bunch of exercises and training situations that you would want to improve on. The players work through a circuit, takes about an hour to do, and then after that they're happy, and they're also paying you for this service, and you're just there kind of managing the situation. But what you're actually doing is you're really helping them understand what training looks like. What does it look like to go and practice, and how that there will impact their game moving forward. So I have people that they just, even though they know how to do it now, they still show up for the training and they still pay for the training sessions, and it's not a lot, like I said, it's more like the gym, like going to the gym sessions. It's not a lot, it's just a little bit, but it's another great way for you to add value to your membership and to the people there. If you're not already doing a lot of group coaching, I think especially when we're talking more on the business side here, I think it's very important that we want to grow our business and get better. And I certainly have my hourly rate, but when I go to group coaching, my hourly rate almost triples. So if I have, say, 8 or 10 people in a group, I will then be able to charge, 2 to 3 times my hourly rate. This is also fantastic because it also drives a lot of one-on-one. So I get a lot of people coming to the group coaching to learn a specific topic. So it's very narrow in the way we look at it. Like I ran a lot last year because it was very popular. I ran a green reading course, and it was 1 hour, but nobody actually putted. Everybody just walked around the putting green learned the different slopes, learned percentages, learned how to read, and sort of, they had a fantastic time. But it was just that little narrow thing. And I've done it for a number of things. I've done it for a better group of players that want to be able to hit a bunker shot with more spin. So it's just set up for that one element. And that group coaching is fantastic, and people get a lot of value out of knowing that, oh, that's that one area that I really want to improve. But like I said, I run a lot of these here because it makes 3 times my normal hourly rate, and the members get a lot of value, and the guests get a lot of value too. Day coaching is something. So if you decide you're going to specialize or do a little bit more in the short game, we are still very much underutilized in terms of golf pros being capable of presenting and teaching this subject matter. So I do these a lot. And again, I charge, probably if it was my hourly rate for the day, I'd probably be about double to go into a club and do this. So I go into a golf club, like Toronto Golf Club here in Canada. They just booked 5 days. They booked me every month, once a month for the whole summer here. I go in there, I do a morning session and an afternoon session with a very small group. The pro takes a percentage for organizing it, and then I get my percentage as well. So if you're building this here out and that facilities maybe don't have anybody doing that, you can kind of, it's a good niche to get into, and it's something that's been extremely popular. I have probably about 20 to 25 clubs that are looking days at the minute. Sadly, I don't have enough days to give them, but I could basically quit my job and only do that one area. And it would be quite good. And it's also very good because you get a chance to go in and have the other pros attend that day and shadow, and then take the information and then use that information then to move forward with coaching their members. So just something that's been good. Again, one of the things that's been useful for me is creating more revenue streams. So I have my own line of training aids, but if you don't have your own training aids, which is totally normal, not many people do, one of the things I would suggest is that you go ahead and buy 10 training aids just to start out, or 5 training aids just to start out, of things that you like, things that you think that a player would benefit from. And during your lessons, what you're going to do is obviously sell those training aids, because that's going to help them create a feedback that's going to allow them to get better, and it will generate more revenue. So every time someone comes for a lesson, they're generally walking away with 2 extra products of mine. So those 2 extra products are probably making me an extra $100 every time they walk away with them. So, you can easily, a lot of these here are keystone markups. So they're 100% markups, and, you're adding value to the player anyway. And if they don't want to buy it, they don't want to buy it. It's not like you're forcing things, but, as you pick the best training aids that you like, it really is a good way to build up that part of the business. And if they have a training aid, they're more likely to go and practice. If they're more likely to go and practice, then they're more likely to improve. They're more likely to talk about your coaching and how you've actually got them better. So and most of you probably do a little bit of this here. I do some online coaching. To be fair, around the short game, I think there's a big opportunity here for someone to do a lot of this, because everybody is doing full swing. There is a ton of coaching, but not many people are doing the online coaching for short game and putting. And I think it's an area that a lot of people, especially because you don't need a simulator, you don't need to swing far, you can do it on a piece of carpet at home. So it's very, very easy. And it's a great way to generate some extra revenue. So I do, I don't like the single lessons. For me personally, I think that level of contact is just, it's like me taking money and then running away with it, with the online stuff. So I just don't like that model, to be honest with you. So I offer a monthly coaching package if people want to do that there. I only limit it to a couple of people because I don't have the time to do as much. But I do enjoy doing the few people that I have the online coaching, and they sign up for a month, and it's basically unlimited. So they can send as many videos. So once we do an initial, initial video, a lot of it is just little checkups here and there through video, which is very, very easy to do. And you can almost do it anywhere, especially with our phones now. So it's another great way to generate that revenue for you. And then I have another business, which is an online video subscription. So I have, I think we've probably got about 150 videos on there. I'm taking my videographer to Florida next on Sunday. We're going down there. We're going to shoot some content with some pros. This video subscription is fantastic because it basically covers a lot of the things that I would want to teach players. And I have in the links here, we won't go through them all, but I have a series of videos that I put in there for you guys to see how I run these videos. So people sign up for the videos. I think it's like $10 a month. And over time, it just keeps growing and growing. And again, as your students are coming to see you, one of the things that they're often asked in questions afterwards, you can refer them back to the videos so that they can go and watch them, and the drills and everything are on there. So you basically do this piece of work once, and you're able to then go ahead and keep sharing it with your students over and over and over and over again. And then obviously keep building out your subscription. And this one's actually really nice. This is almost, for me, almost a standalone business with the amount of people coming in there. But I think the potential is, for me even, is to maybe turn it into 5, maybe 10 times that many subscribers. So I've done it. I've asked a couple of the local pros here in the area to start doing it as well. And even, they don't have a broad, range of people to look for, but it's amazing how all of a sudden they've got 50 or 60 of their members signed up for this service, so, even at $10 a month, that's an extra 600 coming in there, and it's coming in every single month, whether you do anything or don't do anything. So I think it's a really smart way to go about it. But this is kind of how I build out my business. Obviously I coach, obviously on tour, and I coach one-on-ones, but I wanted to talk about some of the things that I think about in terms of growing and building this business, because, everybody's doing full swing. There's opportunity there to specialize and to be great at it, and to share with some other pros so that they can then go ahead and make their business a lot better. So one of the other areas that I've recently got into is course design. So I've had a number of clubs come to me and basically say, we've had an architect come in to design our short game areas, but they didn't really come up with anything that good. It was kind of, they just threw a green in. And, as golf pros, we know exactly the type of shots that we want to create around the green that we would be able to coach with. So for me, I went into the club, a couple of clubs, with 3 at the minute, that are building these short game areas. And we basically went in and designed it so that the members would have a great experience. They'd be able to run leagues and competitions. They're able to run clinics, so they're able to generate revenue. And the area looks fantastic, and it's simulating all of these different types of shots. So this is an area that I'm kind of excited to be involved in, because if we go in and we design an area for a golf club, the pro coaching there is going to generate money, because they're going to have an environment which encourages people to practice and to focus on this area of the game. The club's going to create more demand because they've got something that people don't have. And also that generates food and revenue, food and beverage revenue for the club. So there's some great upside to this. But if anybody's designing, or any of the clubs are looking at practice areas, this is something that I would think about, and selfishly for yourselves, because if the area is designed well, it has the potential to create a very strong business for you in that area. And a lot of clubs kind of just have a little chipping green or a putting green. They haven't really thought it out well enough. So this is definitely something that I think people could really benefit from. So I just wanted to quickly go over like some of those business stuff that we had. If there is any questions about any of that there stuff, I'd love to hear anybody's thoughts.
Nothing in the chat so far. If anybody likes to ask questions now, you can open your mic and ask directly.
No, everybody's still waking up. It's okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, but I think that's a good point that you brought this up, because I think in our profession, I think many times we're kind of too one-dimensional, and we only think, okay, giving lessons on site is that, and like group lessons, you can double or triple or whatever the income and hourly rate. So kind of like being open-minded and seeing all the opportunities, because time is limited, and how to use that time to max the revenue. I think it's really important with all the also online tools nowadays, so easy. So I think to kind of figure out what direction do you want to specialize or go and make more money.
And there's no reason that somebody from the US, the UK couldn't be taking some lessons from you guys in Finland. Like there's no reason. The coaching is obviously top class. We just have to make sure that people are marketing themselves and letting people know that this is the service that they offer. You know, like Canada here, that I help a lot of our younger pros with, is that they, you know, as soon as the golf course closes, they're fired, you know, or laid off for 5 months, you know, so that's 5 months that they sometimes have to go and find other jobs. And my goal for those people is to try to see if we can generate some revenue for them year round, so that they don't have to go take another job in something that they're not interested in, instead of staying in their profession.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so but yeah, I just think it's an important part, and it really allows you to do so much more once you broaden out a little bit more. But we'll keep hammering on here.
Yep.
So we're going to talk a little bit about assessment. We kind of talked a little bit about that last time, and if we're going to have a player come to us, what are we going to go and look at again? And for me, it always comes back down to sort of these three things. We obviously always gravitate to technical, like we just, as golf pros, we know so much, we see the flaws in what people are doing, so we always gravitate to the technical right away, and we don't really look at some of the other things. So for me, I'm trying to be conscious every time that I look at someone, especially when they're like even a decent player, you know, 12 or 13 handicap, you know, yeah, the skill, the technical stuff doesn't look very good, but they're kind of doing it, you know, and like, could I get away with not changing as much technical and sort of build out that skill to help them perform better, you know? Or do they have enough of what they have that I could just go straight into helping them perform? Like, would they be able to perform a little bit better if I showed them how to perform better, how to think better, how to manage themselves better? And if we could kind of do that there, then maybe I don't need to spend as much time on technical, because every time we make a technical change, sometimes it takes a long time sometimes to see the results. So again, this is just sort of framework that I always use, and I have them in different shapes and sizes here because they're not the same. They're very, very different sets of parameters to look at. So when I'm looking at sort of helping a player get better, these are kind of the things that I'm thinking about. So obviously, time on task, you know, like your people come for your lesson and they're like, yeah, you know, I'd like to work on this. And you work on them, and then they come back, you know, a week later and, did you do any practice? No, not really, you know. So we have to keep them accountable in terms of planning out how much time they're actually going to put in there. And when somebody comes back and they haven't put in any time, the first thing I do is I give them the same lesson over again, exactly the same lesson. If they haven't spent any time on it, I'm like, well, there's no point. You've told me this is what you want to improve. You haven't worked at it. Why would we move forward? We're just going to do exactly the same lesson over and over again. So that gets it through to them that they actually need to spend a lot more time on task. When they spend time on task, then we can move forward. But I'm more about developing that skill. And as a younger professional, I probably would have been too intimidated, and I would have just went, oh, okay, well, let's go work on something else today, or let's go do, you know. But really what we're doing is we're shortchanging our players if we do that, instead of saying, no, this is what you agreed on the first day was important to you. Now you're not saying it's important anymore, you know, like, so it's a, you know, you're really not going to create someone that's going to improve at that stage. So we need to make sure that we hold them accountable. And I tell them at the beginning, hey, if you come back and you haven't done any work, we're going to do exactly the same thing, you know? So, and at the end of the day, what's the point of moving forward if they're not actually moving forward? The only thing that you're doing at that point is just educating them, you know? And that might be something like the next topic. If somebody's just coming and they're saying, I just want education, I just want to know more, you know, that's fine. You can know more, but it doesn't mean that you're going to actually improve. So as long as they understand that by giving this education and having all this information, it doesn't mean that you're actually going to get any better, because it's always application, you know, over education is going to make the biggest difference. Then obviously the training that we're using, the type of, like we talked about before, setting up these skill training days for the members and for your players, so that they can go back and actually work on these skills and understand how to do that there. And then the big thing being feedback. You know, what are we going to do for this player to create the feedback that they're doing it well or not doing it well? It's obvious for us, you know, we can see right away, we know right away. And half the time during a lesson, people are so intimidated that they're like, yeah. Well, no, I understand. Yeah, understand. And then they come back, you know, in your next session, and you're like, nothing's like, what's going on here? Like, it's clearly they didn't understand, you know. So we've got to create some feedback, whether it's a training aid, whether it's they're sending video, whether it's putting their videos up for them to see so that they can understand the difference. But if we don't create that feedback, then we're not going to create enough learning so that they're actually going to improve. And then once they've kind of mastered, I shouldn't say mastered, once they've kind of understand what they're trying to do and they're doing it fairly decently, then we sort of get them to perform. So we test them out to make sure that they're able to do it. And then the last thing that we'd be doing would be stress testing them, which would be basically putting them into competition or into situations. I had a player I talked to the other day, and they're down in Georgia, and they're LPGA player, and they wanted to, they said, oh, you know, I'm playing great, but I'm just not doing so good in tournaments, you know? And I'm like, well, what do you think it is? And they're like, I don't know, but I'm swinging it great. I'm doing everything great, but I'm just not competing the way I want to compete. And I'm like, well, who are you playing with? Oh, I'm just playing with like members and stuff, you know? I'm like, well, you know, you're, you know, significantly better than the members. You know, if you're not putting yourself out there and playing with significantly better players, then that's going to be difficult. Now, if you can't do that, I said, here's what you do. You go and you play, go and find a member that'll play you for money and play them for money. Like, you've got to stress test yourself somehow to figure out if you're actually learning or if you're just sort of taking information in. Because if we can apply what we've learned, then we should be able to see it when we actually go to perform. And if we're not seeing it during the performance stage, it means that we're not stressed. We haven't stressed our body out enough so that it knows how to manage. So the more we stress ourselves out, the more we'll actually start to be able to perform at a level that we're expecting to perform. So I often say, for like a scratch player, you know, expect to be about 5 or 6 shots higher during tournament. But if we could stress that player out and give them more exposure, more testing, there's a good chance that we can narrow that gap from, you know, 5 or 6 down to, you know, 1 or 2, and then down hopefully to, you know, that's just the way they play normally. And even some players would often say, I perform even better now in tournaments than I do in practice, just because I have that stress that actually kicks in, that is more like an adrenaline that actually allows me to perform better, as opposed to someone who's not used to the stress and all they want to do is throw up whenever they're out there trying to play. So part of engineering, like we said here, the learning part, if we want to really get that player to improve and to be on a world stage or a provincial stage or national stage, we've got to make sure that we're stress testing them and making sure that they are uncomfortable. The more they're uncomfortable, the more they'll start to perform better under pressure, which is really our job, isn't it? Whether you're just got a guy and he's a local player at the club and he just wants to play better, getting him out there with his buddies that are much better than him so that he can actually perform better. Excuse me. So this is some of the things that I've done with the players when I'm doing a little skill assessment with them. So very, very simply, like I remember Jin Young Ko, when she came to me, I seen her like once before we started working together, and our translator was with me, and I says, okay, well, let's just hit a high high little chip shot. She couldn't do it. Like this is a player who was world number one at now, like, or world number two at the minute. But at that stage, 2.5 years ago, could not hit a high shot. Could not do it with any level of accuracy at all. So only ever knew how to kind of bump little low shots, which seems surprising, So when we go through something at the beginning with players, I always just say, can you hit a high one, a normal trajectory, and a low one? Very, very simple, very, very simple stuff. And you can kind of rate that there. And rate them from 0 to 10 or 0 to 5. Then we do different trajectories to landing targets and then landing spot. So what we'll do is we'll put a T at the landing spot, and then we put another T at the final position, and see if they can perform that, so they know when it lands how it's going to react. Because a lot of times people can chip it well, but they have no clue the energy that the ball has once it hits the ground and then releases. So very, very easy to do. Then we add spin and take spin away. So land at the T and roll past the T. If we're taking spin away, land at the T and land short, finish short of the next T. So we've added some spin there to get the ball to stop. And then we add, obviously, make it more complicated. We add landing targets. And then obviously we go around and we look at different situations, reading lies and predicting outcomes. All of these exercises are done without a pin, So I don't like having a target there. I just like totally randomizing it, having nothing there so that we can look at some very basic stuff with the player. This is the simplest thing that I've found for finding out if somebody can do these things. And the great thing about this here, it'll also build out your plan for coaching them moving forward. Okay, you can't hit it high. Okay, you don't know how to spin it. Okay, you can't get this to happen. You can't hit your landing target. You don't know how to read lies. So you don't know the type of shots that are required from these different lies, So all of a sudden you've got kind of 5 or 6 sessions set up with this player just by going through this assessment and showing them, here's a few weaknesses that you do have, and we could actually make that better. So some of the other testing that we do then when we kind of want to look at putting some math to it and some numbers to it is we just do some fringe, chip, rough, and bunkers, and we just do it in these different categories and randomize. So like we said, 10 shots. So if I take 10 shots from sort of 0 to 10 yards and I measure the distance of the proximity distance for each of the chips, then obviously I can just divide that there and get a perfect number. So, if I end up with the 10 chips and it's 100 feet in total, then I know that it's really the average is 10 feet, so divide that out by 10. So it's a very easy way. And then we can look at, okay, your chipping is 10 feet. This is what PGA Tour is at 3.1. Obviously players are different, a lot of players are obviously not going to be at that level, but it gives you an idea what's possible and where you are, and this is a very simple skill that anybody can get good at. So it's not like hitting a drive 320 yards. So this is something that everybody can really work at. So very simply doing that. And then the big thing is that once we've done that there, we often like to do retesting. because the second time we do something is obviously can be a little bit better. Now because of time restrictions, we don't usually do 10s, but if you have time, you can do 10 again. I usually go down to 3s just to get the players used to doing this here testing. Like we talked about, this at the very beginning of a session with a new player is stress testing, because the likelihood is they're going to be pretty intimidated to do this here at the beginning. And now you've actually made it harder for them by only giving them 3 shots instead of 10 at the beginning. And then again, we can measure and see what their numbers are. Have they improved or have they got worse? You know, this is telling us a lot about how they're actually feeling. You know, if they've got worse, you know, there's a good chance that they're fairly intimidated in that situation and they're not managing themselves very well. So you can you have to manage your coaching around that situation, where if they've actually improved a lot, then maybe they were anxious at the beginning and now they've settled in and they're very comfortable with you. So there's a couple of ways that you can look at it. We can always interpret, like everybody can interpret it different ways, but for me, I just like to see how the player is reacting as we move through it and as they start to get a little more comfortable. So what are we looking for here? We're looking to see, does the player need work? Like when I'm looking at the player, do they need some things that need to change? Or can we just work on helping them perform a little bit better? Like we talked about before, if we could help them perform better by setting up situations and giving them some information, maybe even around their pre-shot routine or assessing the lie, maybe that might be something that would actually get them a lot better. You know, it's easy to go right away to the technical stuff. So we're trying to avoid that. But, you know, there's times that you just look at someone and you just know, yeah, the player needs, they need this change. If they don't get this change, then it's hard for us to do the other stuff and move them forward. And I suppose that comes back to, what does the player want when he's coming to see you? Hey, I've got, like we talk about later, I've got so much anxiety when I chip. I just want to make contact, you know, like, yes, there's often a lot of times that there's something technically not right, but clearly if they've got their anxiety level built up so much, we would probably be better off trying to lower their anxiety level and at least give them some thinking framework that they can do over time, so that when they get up to a shot, that they're thinking the same way every time, and the body will start to get used to that and be able to sort of at least manage the situation. Because what you're going from that anxiety level is you're going from, you know, baseline to you get up to the chip that you're afraid of, and it's like it's through the roof. So that anxiety, it jumps too high too quick, and the player is shaking and nervous and they can't think straight, and there's no way that they could perform well anyway, even with that there. So it's just something to think about. But like, so again, you know, if we can just fill in some knowledge gaps as well as you're going through that assessment, you're looking at these things and you're saying, okay, well, the player doesn't know this or this or this. I could spend some time on the golf course just running through some different things that maybe they don't know, you know, and that can be massively important, because the truth is that these players that are coming to you, they're going to YouTube and they're Googling, how do I chip from this rough? How do I do this? Like, and if you go to YouTube and Google and you look up the searches for golf and around short game, you're going to get all of the lists of things that people are actually interested in learning because of the search criteria. And even if you took the top 5 of that, and I bet you if you asked it to any of your clients, they'd go, yeah, I'd like to know more about that, you know. Then easy way to build it out again. Again, what we're looking for here is, as we're doing those exercises and the skill testing, or the assessment, players will start to get very cocky, meaning that you could see the confidence in them because they really want to perform well, and then other people will just shy away. So it's telling us a lot about their personality and what we want to do. So if I get a player that really loves the challenge, I know that I really need to challenge this player a lot. And if I challenge them a lot, then they're going to just keep getting better and better. If I just keep giving them information, you know, and block practice, they're probably going to lose interest pretty quickly and maybe not get as much out of it. where the player that, you know, is just shunning away from it, you know, obviously we've got into the next topic, we kind of got low self-esteem there. They're nervous because they're around us, you know, so there's obviously that fear of failure, you know, where the thing that I always tell my players is that I want you to feel as much as possible, because every time you feel, we're able to rebuild you stronger and better. If we can feel forward, then we're going to be a much, much better player. So, you know, I'm excited whenever the player comes to me and they go, oh, I completely messed up there. I'm like, oh, tell me about it. What happened? That's awesome. You know, they're like, what? Yeah, that sounds great. Tell me all about it, you know, like, because I want to know. And they're like, how, but I like, see how much I messed up. I'm like, yeah, that's fantastic. You know, this is what we're going to do the next time you have that situation. They're like, okay, let's go practice that as if it was about to happen, so we know what to do the next time. So what we've done is we've put a plan in place for a situation that might happen. You know, so it's basically a checklist. You know, if you're on an airplane, the pilots have checklists so that as they're flying and getting into different areas, they have a checklist to make sure that, oh, okay, I know this might happen. This is what I do. I know this might happen. Okay, so they go through their checklists as they're managing it. Especially new people there, they're going to be super embarrassed whenever you're with them. So they're going to struggle. They're going to struggle mightily at the beginning. So we don't really want to be coaching. This is why we like the skill assessment. We don't really want to be coaching anybody after a couple of shots, because they're still getting used to being around you. And if we start jumping in and coaching people and teaching people right away, then we might be looking at just something that their body is just totally out of sorts and they're hitting shots that they probably don't normally hit. So we're going to start making changes based on that, as opposed to giving them time to test them and see what happens. And then obviously, you know, I always like this one where the players always blame, oh, this putter is just, you know, I need to get you wedges. And, you know, like that's obviously an interesting one, because it goes back to their personality, you know. So you can see that they're obviously not comfortable around you because they're playing that kind of blame game. A lot of players will also talk about, I can't get to that next level, you know, and a lot of that there is that they don't know. Like if I ask player, okay, you've got a chip from 0 to 10 yards, what is the distance that you would hit it onto the green? Like what is the distance from the hole? You know, a lot of people just wouldn't know. So how can you possibly measure your improvement if you're not tracking these information and these data points to know that you're actually getting better? Because if I have a player, and let's just say they started out at 10 feet from the hole, and next week they're 9 feet from the hole, 10 feet and 9 feet from 0 to 10 yards is not going to make any difference to their score, but we know that they have actually improved by a foot. We know that there is something that we can quantify that they actually are moving in the right direction. So by creating this assessment plan, we actually are starting to allow the player to know that they're getting better. And now they've got a target. Now they're like, okay, that was 9 feet. Next week, I'm gonna get it. And next week, maybe they're 8 feet, you know? So we're actually starting to see the player move along through that. And then obviously what I always ask the players, talk me through what you're thinking about, talk me through what you're saying to yourself. Because a lot of times, you know, what we're saying to ourselves is just not useful, you know? So we have to almost, what I do is I write out a script for the players and they have to follow that level of thinking every time for the shot. So we just practice the script over and over and over again, because it creates that level of self-talk that we're actually trying to work through. And this is going over some of the things that we have for our training. So every shot the same way in terms of the way that we're thinking about it and assessing it. Obviously, like we talked about the baseline, we want to have baseline numbers so that we know if we're improving or not. Develop resilience through failure. So we want the player to feel so that they can start to understand where they are. And then obviously build the confidence through the doing, through physically doing the skill. That's how we build the confidence, not attaching it too much to the performance. The behavior that we want is really important. So if you see players and they're losing it, you know, on the golf course, or they're portraying an image that's very timid or weak, you know, especially when they get into tournament play, we have to start that behavior in training. So we have to make sure that they maybe not outwardly are strong and, you know, dominating, but maybe there's a feeling or a behavior that they're trying to sort of bring out in them that, you know, I always talk about Rory McIlroy's walk. Like Rory McIlroy could intimidate players with his walk. Same as like Dustin Johnson, you know, they've got just this aura about them. And one of the things we do is we set the players in motion with that type of behavior, and we'll get them to do a drill. And it could be any drill, it doesn't really matter. But the exercise is based around the behavior that we want to create. So the vision that we have for ourselves as we play and as we compete, we want that vision and that behavior. And then we ask the player to actually do that. And we video them doing it. And we show them and say, this video, is that what you think you want to be like when you're playing? And they're like, no, I need to do it a bit more. Or no, that looks really good. I like that there. I look strong. So anytime you video the player when they're competing, you can show them the video and say, is this the person that you want to be when you compete? And often they'll say, no, that's not what I want to be. So we go back to the behavior, being able to dictate that performance and change things. But we have to start it at training. And then obviously when we're setting out things, we just have to be realistic about the exercises. Unless we're designing the stress testing and the failure model, where most of it, but it's only going to be a very small portion that we're going to be doing that failure stuff. Everything else we should be doing is kind of like, if you set your goal here, let's say it's 8 feet, your proximity, we're just trying to get to 7 feet, 7.5 feet, you know, we're not trying to make it 5 feet, you know, because we just want to help get the player grow incrementally up and up and up and up. And then I posted a thing on social, you know, because a player was bragging about how many putts that they were hitting every day. And I know that they haven't improved very much. And I'm like, well, you know, you've got to become better at your first attempt. So the first tee shot that day, the first iron shot, the first shot on that hole, whatever it is, the first putt, you've got to become better at doing it the first time. And that's kind of our motto. We just want to become better at executing more often. And that's why we call this the 10-3-1 rule. So when we're starting out and we're hitting shots, we give the player 10 shots to execute as best they can. And then we track the proximity. And then we give them 3 shots. And as they start to get better, then we move them into 1 shot. You know, so if the 10 number is not above 5, we're not really going to push them too much into the 3s, because it's not going to do too much. And if the 3 number proximity is not close enough to where we want to be, then we're not really going to push them into 1s, because they're just not there yet, you know. So we start off with 10 balls, 3 balls, 1 ball, and that there allows them to start to perform better every time. So this is Jin Young Ko here. So you see the balls all gathered beside each other. This was a number of shots here. I think we were doing 5 balls in this category. Sometimes I do 10, sometimes I do 5. And we're hitting it up onto the green there. We'll go up, we'll measure it, and then we'll see. And then we've got the one on the right here. And this is actually on the golf course. So the same thing that we've done on training, then we've gone out onto the golf course. See if I can play this properly. Let me pause the other one here. Probably annoying. Play now for me. It's a little slow. So we have 3 balls here in this situation. The caddy is up there on the green, and he's measuring the distance that these balls are finishing. So she's got 1 up there. That's her second. She'll hit her 3rd up there, and then we'll measure the proximity. So we're taking the training that we do, and the one on the left is actually a practice area. It's not actually a golf course. So this is the practice area on the left, and this is the golf course. So the work that we're doing in the practice moves forward to the training. So that's an important area there for us. And then obviously when we're doing practice rounds and stuff, what I would always recommend is, a lot of people just get out there and they kind of waste their time in their practice rounds. They're not really taking in information. They're kind of out there, but they're not really. So I always do at least 3 holes that we have an up and down match. So we make the player execute an up and down at least 3 times. And then obviously when we're learning the golf course, we rank the surrounding of the holes in 1, 2, or 3. We don't write in our books, don't go here or don't go there. Obviously 1 is, I'm getting up and down most of the time. 2, I'm getting up and down probably 75% of the time. And 3, I'm getting up and down probably about 30% of the time. So that's kind of how we rank them. So we just put these numbers on our books so that we can actually see. When we're going to the holes on the golf course, generally, and I work mostly on the LPGA tour, so generally a player will not miss a green, or very rarely miss a green with a 7-iron or an 8-iron or less. Like they hit, like the ones I have, I think Jin Young Ko was from the fairway, she was something like 89%. So super high. So chipping on holes that you have 7-iron or less in doesn't make any sense. So we only chip on the holes that would be a longer club, because that would be the chance that we would miss those greens. So we spend more time putting on the holes with 7-iron or less in, and then we spend more time chipping on the other ones, because that's where we would need to actually make up that part. Obviously getting an idea of the greens so that we know when we're chipping to different areas, what would be an easy or a hard chip would be important with the mapping. And then again, like we said, the situational training, which I have kind of sprinkled throughout this presentation here, is that inside, like if I had a bunker shot, inside 10 feet bunker shot, that would be, whether we do probably a 3 or a 1 shot to do it. We do a really fun exercise on the PGA Tour, and it's called bunker races. So we'll have, say, 3 players out, all of their caddies, and sometimes some of the coaches will be out there. And probably one of the last holes of the day, we'll find the biggest bunker that we can find, and everybody gets into the bunker and hits a shot. And the worst shot, whether it's the player, the caddy, or the coach, has to rake the whole bunker. But pros being pros, what they do is they jump in first, and if they hit a really good shot, they run all over the bunker and make the bunker a complete mess, just so that they know that they're probably not going to be in. But again, this is just something fun, but it's also something that it's a little bit of competition. Anytime you can create a little bit of fun, a little bit of competition. So we call those bunker races, which is really good. And you could do it with a group of juniors, get them all in there, get everybody to hit a shot and make a mess of the bunker, and then make the worst shot, clean the bunker. That player is going to go and work on it. And again, that creates that little bit of stress. But these are fun things that we do on the golf course. And then also we do some wedge games as well. If we're out there 90 yards, we try to call a number depending on how we're feeling that way, inside 10, 15 or 20 feet, whatever it might be. And then I have little discs. I don't know if I have them here. They're little, basically round discs. And I will put them into around the greens so that the players can chip and practice to those targets. We never practice to the flags, because the flag is never going to be there during the tournament. So it's kind of a wasted one. So one of the things that I always think about here is when I'm coaching the players, I want them to feel more than anything. So they will try something, they will struggle with it, they'll look for information right away, but I want them to try it a bit more, feel a bit more. Then I want to get their feedback. Okay, tell me what you're thinking, tell me why it's not working, and then I'll give my feedback last. So I always work on this process for the players. And it seems to be quite good, because what we're doing is we're stressing the importance of them learning the information. if they try something and it doesn't work, and they look right to me right away for the information, then I give it to them. They haven't really learned it. It's a disservice to them, so we've really got to, and they don't like this. Nobody likes this here. Nobody likes failing, and nobody likes having to try to figure out why themselves before going to you. But I think it's an important one for us to be able to do. So any questions about kind of creating that assessment and why we'd create it, or?
Nothing in the chat so far. And also, like I said previous time, if anybody wants to open up their mic now, so now is good time. A lot of stuff there to chew up, but I think really great to kind of learn how you're preparing for tournaments and stressing out players, because I think that's, like you mentioned, the kind of really important part, that if they can't kind of handle the stress, it's going to affect their performance. So I think that's one thing that might be lacking. I can't talk for everybody, but just to kind of thinking of my own coaching is that, do we stress out the players enough, and how, and also kind of being careful not to stress out at the wrong time. So kind of, if they're anxious already, so that's not maybe the real time to do that. So kind of create that rapport, and then start kind of moving, like you said, to 10-3-1 approach, and then as the skills develop, then how much they can handle and how to push them. But
yeah, and that's the art of coaching versus just being a teacher. Which is a great point which you've made.
What do you think, or your opinion about maybe coaching more kind of club level players that using testing and stuff like that? Are they, in your opinion, are they kind of willing to do them, or are
they believe it or not, they love it? Right?
Yeah.
They love it, but the thing is that we have to educate them why. Hey, this is why we're doing this here, because the model in their mind of teaching, they only have a model of teaching and taking a lesson. So what they're buying, what they think they're buying, is information. That's what they think they're going for, a lesson for information, but we're not really giving them information. We're giving them so much more. The information is only a small part of them actually improving. So for us, I think we have to educate them and say, this is the way that the best players in the world learn. And we had this conversation before we got on camera, is that I was looking at the things that I was doing with my tour pros, and I'm thinking, why am I not doing this with Mrs. Jones, who's a 30 handicapper? Like, why am I teaching her, this way? Wouldn't she enjoy the training? Wouldn't she enjoy, because she's coming to get better, like, wouldn't she enjoy getting the same type of training that our tour pro would get? Why are we putting these tour pros on the pedestal and giving them all this great, training? and Mrs. Jones just gets just keep your elbow in a little bit there, and don't do too, it's very, I think they're still, even if their skill level is not good, they're still people. They still appreciate good information and good training. And if you're thoughtful about what you're doing with them, and they know that you're doing it for that reason, then they're going to buy into it. But you'll also get people like, no, I don't want that. I just tell me what I'm doing wrong, and you tell them what they're doing wrong, and they move on, and they're probably not going to be good clients for you. You probably don't want them as clients, to be honest with you, because as people who like coaching, we like coaching people who want to be coached.
Yeah. It might be like we discussed earlier before we went online, is that it might be us coaches that are kind of limiting people from learning this stuff. So we're kind of assuming that they are handicap 36, though, so they don't want to learn this stuff, but actually they would, but they don't know that this stuff actually exists. So we're kind of the limitators, or we can make it possible as well.
So it was interesting you said that. So I was doing a site visit for one of the short game areas that I'm designing, and I had the whole committee there at the club, and they're all there. So I've got a couple of good players, a couple of medium players, and a couple of higher players, And I'm talking about these different shots and how cool it would be. And you could spin it off this hill and do this and do that. And then you could do this and this and this. And the higher handicappers are going, you're designing this thing for good players. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And he goes, well, why? I don't do any of that stuff. No, because you don't know any of this stuff. You don't know how to do any of this stuff. But if we don't design it for you to go in that direction, if you do become a good player, you're going to be disappointed if we build a crappy little place that really is designed for a 30 handicapper. But I started talking to him, okay, here's how this shot would work for you. And then here's how the next shot, next level for you improving would work. And then you'd be up talking about what we're talking about with these guys. But we're not designing it, not thinking about those players, but those players just don't know.
Yeah,
we're over their head. The information has gone over their head. So it's an interesting point, you know, and would they really love to hear about that? Of course they would. Like that's pretty cool stuff, you know. Whether they could do it at this stage, probably not, but why would we shortchange that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, no questions, so let's continue.
All right, so I'm going to try and set this up. Anybody wants to go take a break for a second, they can while I get this set up, but shouldn't be long. All right. That work? No?
No, not yet.
Oh.
Let's see.
Did I share my, oh, I need to stop sharing this. Okay, so let me talk about this here really quick first so that we can do this here. So these are the areas that we're going to do. I'm going to take a picture of these so I can remind myself. Okay, so these are the main areas that we're going to try to quantify when we're working with players. And I like to do, like we had talked about before, I like to make sure that I'm not developing a player that only can do one thing really well all the time, meaning that I don't want a player that is super consistent. And I know that sounds really weird to say that there. Why wouldn't you want someone that's super consistent? The problem is that around the short game, we don't want a player to be super consistent. We want them to be malleable so that they can do so many different things and can hit so many different shots. So with all of these different areas here, we want to be able to change setup, grip, swing plane, weight, low point, attack angle. We want to be able to change those things so that we can get the players to actually improve. One of the things that I do, and I'm going to try to do a little demonstration now and talk you through it, is I try to get the players to do this little skill training, which is we change the path from a cut path to a zeroing out to a draw path. Angle of attack, we go 3, 6, 9, so steeper each time. And then we get them to change the loft of the club, which is, you know, obviously at their dynamic. So at impact, we try to get them to 46, 50, 54, 58, roughly. Smash factor, so taking away the energy of the golf ball. So when the ball lands, it just doesn't have that forward momentum. And then obviously strike location. I want the club. Grab the club. I want it to be hit, you know, either sort of low on the face, middle, or a little bit higher. So as the strike moves down the face, more friction is created, and this ball will spin more. As it moves up the face, it will create more slippage, and it will not have the same amount of friction, and it doesn't spin as much. So that's, oh, I'll just show you this one really quick. So this is my online video, and this is kind of what I would go through with the players, and I'll just see if I can play.
Okay.
No.
So let's talk setup today. A couple of key points that we need to get right before we set up. Now, as we work on our chipping, one of the things that we need to be able to do is we need to be able to rotate through a little bit. If I stand very square with my chipping, this hip is going to block me. So now I'm going to have a chance to sort of almost throw my hands at it. So what we're going to do from setup position is we're just going to flare our left foot. But from this line, we're actually going to keep everything in line. We're not going to change anything here. So ball position is going to be in the middle. We're going to flare this left foot a little bit. Our hand position is going to be about 5 degrees forward. You know, we see a lot of this forward press too much. It's just slightly ahead, probably right over the top of the ball, to be honest with you. And then the last thing now we need to do is we need to grip down the club. That allows for better contact as it brushes through the grass. So left foot slightly open, everything else is square, hands are slightly forward, I've gripped down the club, and then I go ahead.
Okay, so that's just showing you some of the videos that I would produce looking at, you know, just something simple like going back here for our setup. But I'm going to try to stop this one here, and I'm going to try to share my other screen. Is that working there?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I got a message in the chat that I'm not sure if this was all already visible before you when you were showing the video. So
Okay.
anyone else? Ari commented that it was the foresight. So did you miss the video there? Anybody? Because I was seeing the video you showed on my screen, but I'm not sure if it.
I didn't see.
Okay, but somebody did see, somebody didn't.
I see the video.
Okay, that's weird.
All right.
Okay, so many saw the video in the chat, so a couple didn't.
Okay. They may have to go back and rewatch that in the
Yeah, in the recording then, so. So just for those that didn't see the video, like Gareth mentioned, so watch the recording afterwards. So if you missed the video, then you can see it. But it was just a kind of example. So.
Okay. So a couple of things that we like to do with the players is I'll start off and I'll ask them. So this is a 25-yard shot, and I have my dots on my club. If you have a quad, this or a TrackMan or whatever, this is quite good. So as I take my normal kind of swing here, I kind of want to see roughly what it is I'm doing. So I struck it out on the toe. If you can see, you guys see the numbers on that too? Yeah, you can see the numbers, right? Okay, good. So I struck it out on the toe. You can see my attack angle there was 2.1. So what we would do is we would isolate just one number and look at that number. So that was basically at 2.1, that's basically chunky, you know, basically chunked that one. So, you know, as the player's getting ready and they're hitting a few more, you know, they might do something different. So there I'm up to 5. So as we've hit 4 or 5 shots, what we're going to do is figure out what the player normally does. So once I know, okay, the player normally is 5 down, then I would say, okay, why don't we see if we can make you go to something a little steeper. Now, players can do this a number of different ways. One of the ways that we can do steeper is obviously moving it back in my stance. So I'm moving it back in my stance. This will create a steeper angle of attack as I hit that shot in there. So I'm 9 degrees down. Okay. Now, what other way could I create that steeper angle of attack? So I could set my wrists. So as I'm here, instead of sort of a lot of people will swing without any wrists, I can set my wrists a little bit more. You know, I'm pretty wristy normally. So by setting my wrist more, I know even if I just keep the ball in the middle, I know that I'm going to create, that's 11, you can see it from the numbers there, that's 11 degrees down. Okay, and then that's 3 degrees down. So you can see there that I went from 11 degrees down, which would be very steep, to 3 degrees. We want a player to be able to adjust and know how to do that, because that allows them to be able to manage different situations. So for instance, the reason we would do that is if we get in a tournament and we're looking at the grass and we're saying, okay, this is super thick, rough. We need to be able to create an angle of attack that's more like 10 down or 11 down or 9 down or whatever it is. The other thing is that if we go to like Bermuda, you know, and that steep swing on Bermuda grass is just going to explode the grass and it just makes a complete mess. I need the player to be much shallower. So if they only can do one thing, and like I've had players like before, maybe 20 shots and they can't move those numbers nearly as much as they want to move them. So that would be the first thing that I would do. Then I would basically do a little bit of path work. So I'm going to get them to learn to swing more like a draw swing here. So there's almost 3 degrees, 2.9 degrees in to out. And then I would get them to obviously understand what straight felt like. So there's 0 path, 0.3. And then I would get them to feel like just maybe 3 degrees across it. So that's 5 degrees, so a wee bit too much. But having an ability to hit a draw, straight one, or a cut shot, because as most of you guys will know, most people who are coming for chipping, they're already preset. Their setup is so open, their body line is so open that they're always coming across the ball. So the chance for them to hit different shots isn't really quite there. So let me see my other topics here. Okay, so once we've kind of done a little bit of path work for them, and we've done a little bit of attack angle, then we're going to teach them how to deliver loft. So most people, when they're coming in, they're always over shaft leaning. So they're coming in way too much like this here, handle. The leading edge is digging, and they're also chunking so many of them, you know. And we'll often see that ball position back, hands are way too far forward, you know, and they've got a golf ball that always runs. So that one there is 40. You can see it on your screen. It's a little bit of a delay here. Sorry, I might be going too fast. Probably going a little bit too fast for this information to pop up. So you can see there that the loft there is 42. Okay, that's generally where we get the player putting it way too far back in their stance, and kind of driving it in there. You can see the launch on the golf ball there too was quite low.
Sorry, Gareth, what loft are you hitting there? What wedge?
This is a 60 degree.
Okay.
60 degree king eye 2. So then what we would do is, obviously this is where they are at 42. Now if I just keep the ball in the middle of the stance, maybe they still have their hands forward, we hit the same shot, we're up to 49 degrees of loft. So leave it slow. You can see there the loft, and all I did is I moved the ball position from the middle, the back of my stance, to the middle of my stance, which for a lot of people, they're so used to chipping off their back foot that I pretty much, unless I'm making the ball run low, never getting anybody to chip off their back foot. Then if I just move it up to my front foot now, chip it from here. Oh, idiot. Okay. Then that will produce. Oh, didn't get it. Didn't quite get the dots. But it probably would produce closer to about 56 degrees of loft. So being able to go from dynamic loft of 40, to 46 to 50 to 54 to 58. Now, all of that, by the way, is still done from a square stance. I'm not opening up a ton. It's done with the takeaway and how I'm actually turning the club on the way back here. So I can either rotate it open or I can hood it closed. The same on the follow through. I can release it open or I can release it closed. These are all going to affect the spin and the trajectory and the contact. If I want to go and try and create 60 degrees at impact, I'm obviously going to roll it open a little bit here. And I create a lot of loft there. So as I'm doing this here, I'm trying to manipulate all of the different situations, and then even to the point where I want to try to create as much spin as possible and as little spin as possible. So with my 60 here, I hit it way too hard, but what I did there was I actually took spin off the ball. So that one spun 3,800 RPM. See that? Yeah, 3,800 RPM. And now we'll move it up just a touch, a little bit more, but not a lot. So there's 5,400 RPM, and then we'll move it up. Try and move it up a touch more here. $62. Wasn't great contact, the last one. But the fact is that to be able to move the ball from 3,000 RPM to 4,000 to 5,000 to 6,000, this is a 25-yard shot. So 6,000 RPMs is still a pretty good little nipper one. So there's 7,600 RPM on that one. So the fact is that we want the players to be able to do all of these things so that they can start to be able to execute different shots. So again, we've got our angle of attack, we've got loft, we've got path. We can do a little bit of trajectory, but I usually, I like playing around with machines so that we can get the feel of how much I want to open it or how much I want to close it. That's the other thing. That if I want to get this ball to release a little bit, even though it's a 60, I'm going to draw it. I'm going to hood it, meaning I'm going to take a little bit of loft in the back. And I'm just going to let that club face release a little bit more here. Throw it a little bit further than that. But that will effectively take when this ball lands, see the way it will release. That'll take a minute to probably show up on your screens. But yeah, 3,900 RPM. So I played that 60 so it would actually release. Oops, let me get down here so you can see me. So one of the things is just being able to being able to change the players so that they can have different attack angles, different lofts, different impact positions to create all these different types of situations. Because once they can do that, then their ability to hit different shots is so much easier. So then we talk in a language where we would say, okay, I want your attack angle to be either shallow, medium, or steep. I want your loft to be high loft, medium loft, low loft. I want maximum spin, normal. I want as little spin on it as possible. And then once you kind of do that there, then it opens up so that the player understands kind of what they're doing. Any thoughts or any questions as I'm running through this here, so I don't miss anything while I'm moving away from the screen?
Nothing so far in the chat. I'll just check that there wasn't anything. No, just comments about the video that we discussed earlier. But see, do you have one question from me? Is because you could see some tour player videos like Phil Mickelson in social media, kind of teaching putting the ball back in the stance, kind of the old school way. Is there a reason for that, or is it just?
I think it's hard to argue with Phil's success, but I would say it's not the right way to do it, because there is so many good things that can happen by having the ball in the middle of your stance. And for the average player doing it, it's a lot easier, because the biggest problem that we have with most players is something called our low point. So our low point is basically, if you imagine your sternum here. So as the club comes down, it's at its lowest point right here, right in the middle. Okay, so if I end up not being able to manage that low point, and now I put the ball too far forward and I'm leaning into it, we're going to get a lot of maybe higher handicaps chunking that one. So I do like low point control as well for players, which basically we can do by just moving the sternum onto the target side if we're using the leading edge. But if I'm not using the leading edge, I can have the sternum sit back here a little bit, and I can use a bit of the bounce. So why don't we talk about that? Because I think it's maybe an interesting thing, which is because whether you have the ball forward or back, we talked about, but what about weight distribution? When you think about weight distribution, we've all been taught that if I put my weight onto my lead leg, that's how I should chip. But really what you're doing is you're moving your sternum forward. If I put weight onto my lead leg, I'm going to change the attack angle, making it steeper. So if I have this shot here, and let's just say I keep it in the middle of my stance, everything fairly normal, and I'm going to put 80% of my weight here on my lead leg, and I chip. Nice little shot. But for me, being a steep player anyway, that's 10 degrees down. That is a lot to be hitting down on the golf ball. So I generally like to be in and around the six degrees of attack angle, because it really has a better ground interaction. So the shot that I just played there has got spin on it, but because the trajectory is so low, because I put so much weight on here, it's driving it down and changing the attack angle. So the opposite of that is, what if I put 80% of my weight back on my trail leg here and play that shot? So I've got 80% of my weight back, but I'm going to keep my sternum over the ball. So 80% of my weight back made my attack angle, which you'll see coming up on the screen in a minute, my attack angle at 0.4. So my attack angle was perfectly flat just by putting either my weight back or my weight forward, but we kept the sternum in the center point here. The problem with people when they start to put their weight back is they start to move the center point back as well. And that center point then obviously makes them bottom out too much, you know, so that caused some trickiness. I got a little question there. Maybe you can, I just seen it pop up there, but maybe you can.
Yeah. So there's a question. What is your opinion about the most efficient way to hit a most amount of spin in a 50-meter shot, club, dynamic loft at the cuff angle?
Okay, why don't we simulate it? $50 meters, so 55 yards.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. So the thing is that we want to create as much friction as possible. So we've got to get the strike location low on the club face, and we've got to create enough loft. Like obviously, if I have my hands forward, I am gonna create spin because it's kind of a longer shot. But I actually want to try to create more loft. So I want to create an impact that's a bit more like that. I want the strike to be low on the face. Now, if I have a little bit of cut spin, just a little bit of cut spin, I will be able to swing the club faster. And therefore, I'll be able to generate more speed. Now, if I was actually playing the shot for the purpose of creating as much spin as possible, wasn't that great there? I would be cutting it, and I would be hard, kind of cutting a little bit across it, trying to keep some loft on it. But the problem with that there is that it's unpredictable. So the math would say that a little bit across with good dynamic loft, with a low contact point is a great way to spin it, but it's not really realistic for normal play. Where, you know, and if I do that there, right? I don't know, even though it was a bit chunky, that one. That was, you know, 8,400 RPM. So it's got some decent spin on it, you know, but nothing too crazy. Whereas if I played this shot and I had maybe my path a little bit more from the inside, and on my release, I don't let the club turn over. I just sort of hold the club open a little bit. It should produce a nice little shot. Okay, so the numbers on that one, so it's 58, so 94, you can see it there in your numbers, 9,400 RPM. Attack angle sort of 8 degrees down, and the vertical impact was basically 0, you know, so I could have spun it a little bit more if it was a little bit low. Now, the strike was a little bit on the toe, you know, 17 mil on the toe. So that did take a little bit of the friction away. It didn't quite give me kind of the shot that I would have wanted. But you know, that's how I would play. But my launch angle was 30 degrees, and my path, the path of the golf club was 1.5 out to the right. So it had more draw spin. So I think a lot of players think that they need to be playing like these hard, like cutting across the ball type of a swings, but it's just not true. You know, really, if we have a decent club ball relationship and the strike's nice and low on the face, you know, we can spin it. And usually in this distance here, you know, if I really get one pretty good, a little bit lower off the face, I can get it close to 10, you know, but I have to see it coming back there pretty good. Spin on it. Yeah, so there's 10,500 RPM. Now, but the big thing there is that I just used a bit more speed. So I added a little bit more speed and a little bit more, little feeling like it's cutting just a fraction, you know, and that obviously at 10,500 RPM on this type of shot, it's a ton of spin. Okay, any thoughts?
Well, just a following question from me. Would you approach all the kind of the shorter distances with the same way? If you want to create more spin, just try to keep the pad pretty neutral and not try to kind of come too much from out to in.
Yeah, because I think what we have is we get that strike location just moving around the club face too much. And I'm more concerned with getting the strike in the middle and then low in the face. So I would have players practicing with like rubber bands around the club face, because what we're going to find, especially when you've got young juniors and stuff, is that they strike it so much on the toe and it's steep and it's cutty and it's unpredictable, you know? And if you watch a good player, their path is zeroing out pretty good. You know, they're 6, 7, 8 degrees attack angle down, you know, 50 degrees of dynamic loft. If they want to create more, they might do it at address. So they might just let the handle sort of lean back a touch at address. So we create a little more dynamic loft, but trying to keep everything the same. But like I said before, we obviously want to have a consistent shot, because it's a bit more like this is a bit more like a golf swing. But as we get closer, we want to be able to adjust a lot more, because I can, you know, at 50 yards, I can create 10,000 RPM spin. So we can do anything. We can stop the ball on a dime. Like, we don't have to worry. There's no reason for us to do anything else. As we move closer, then it changes quite a bit, because, you know, we can't create the same amount of spin anymore. So then we have to rely on other ways, which would be our smash factor. So if we brought the distance back down into this sort of awkward range, you know, which is 24 yards here, then let's pretend that I can't spin the ball anymore. I need to be able to basically cut across the golf ball a little bit here to take a little bit of the energy. And what we're looking for here is smash factor, probably something closer to 1 or 0.7. Little Tony, and I threw it kind of far, so it was 0.8. So meaning that the ball speed, the club speed was faster than the ball speed. Okay. So if I wanted to really get that more, I just open up the club face a little bit more. It'll create a little bit more slippage, and then that will hopefully, that's still 8. Probably need to cut it a little bit more, 0.8 to get that there spin. Question there.
Yeah, there's a question. Preferred wedge shaft for creating spin, weight, or even model, or is it mostly personal?
You know, it's interesting. This is the one I've been playing last year, and it's a regular shaft. It's a graphite regular CB from Ping, and I really like it, so I can generate quite a bit of spin from it. If I have, you know, I have a project X here, and it's good, but it's significantly heavier, and because it's heavier, I can't move it as fast. Because I can't move it as fast, I can still spin it, but I can't spin it with the same regularity as I can with the other one. So I would say when it comes to spin, the lighter in the graphite seems to do the trick. Now, when we're playing golf, here's what I noticed this year is that the graphite shaft is fantastic for spinning it, but it's so light that it almost, you lose your feel around the greens with some of the chips, because it's like, you know, it feels like it's a baby club, you know, it's like a little toy. So it's a bit dinky. So I think for me, having something that was, I'm probably going to go this year with a graphite shaft, a little heavier, and I'm going to go into the stiff graphite this year, because that'll give me a little more weight, but it's not the same weight as a normal wedge, but it'll still allow me to spin it as much as I like, you know. The greens that we have at our club, it's very linksy almost, because it's very, very firm. So you have to really nip it just to get it to stop, because most of the time it releases. So for me, having a club that spins a lot is great, but you know, that club there, if I go to a normal club where the greens are receptive, it's terrible because it's zipping right off every single green. So in that case, I'd have to find a different combination there for that course. But like I said, I wanted to show you guys. Is there any questions before I take this screen away?
No, not now.
Okay. So stop sharing this one. Okay, so go back to my presentation. Okay, so like we said before, one of the things that we would like to do there is obviously showing the difference is in path and path, attack angle, dynamic loft, smash factor, and then strike location on the face. So I want the players to be able to have the variability to do this. So this would be a training session that we would ask the player to do one thing. So one thing might be, I want you to swing 3 degrees in to out. And then what we would ask the player is, I want you to swing 3 degrees in to out, 6 down, 50 degrees of dynamic loft, 0.9 smash factor with a low strike location. And it seems like a lot, and it is a lot. But as we're training them, again, we're bringing in that stress element where we're not making this easy on them. But as they start to understand how to adapt and change all of these situations, when they go to play golf and they are faced with a situation, they are so capable of hitting the shots that they need to hit. So it's really good.
Okay, so
now, like I have a bunch of videos here. I'm not going to bore you with them all. You can watch them afterwards.
Okay, so
But go through these here, but they'll be in your presentation. So again, when we look at setup here, what we're noticing is feet, knees, hips, everything fairly square. I think in the past, everybody's sort of been a bit too open, and that just creates variability on the face for strike. So for me, I love the players just to be nice and square.
Slow. Try and get it to stop quickly.
This is one of Moria. And if you notice, if you watch, she's trying to hit a little spinner here. And if you watch her club path, watch the way she takes the club path on the way back here, inside, and then holds the release on the way through, doesn't swing it left. So she gets that strike in the middle of the face, low on the face. And she's probably one of the best on the LPGA, chipping wise.
Try and get it to stop quickly.
You can see that low. When you see that trajectory going out super low like that, that means that the strike on the face was very, very low. So again, one thing that we always want to talk about too is setup versus dynamic loft. So we always tend to get more dynamic loft in terms of the hands going further forward. You don't necessarily see the opposite happening. So for me, I think I'd like to see the face not I like to see the shaft not push too far forward, but just slightly forward, because we're always going to create more dynamic loft. And then obviously getting the player to try to understand if this is where they're starting, could they come back to that exact same point and create the same amount of dynamic loft as they had at impact, at address, sorry. This is another image of that showing that kind of setup. So there's setup and there's really what impact is. Now you'll notice that the club face is a little bit open at impact. It's a little bit open because what we're trying to do is create a little bit more bounce. So anytime that you open up the club face, so if the club face is square, anytime you open it, you add bounce. So 1 degree of open club face creates 1 more degree of bounce. 1 more degree of loft creates another degree of bounce. So if you technically leaned the club back and opened it, you'd be creating as much bounce as you possibly. So but you can see generally the hands always shaft lean forward. So we have to teach players often how not to shaft lean as much so that we can create a bit more bounce. So again, this is Moria Jutanagarn here, and it's a little bit jaggedy, that video. See if I can get it to be cleaner for you. But one of the things that you'll notice, you might see as you go through it here, is the ball position is up in her stance, and the shaft is slightly forward, but she will return the shaft to the same point, maybe even a little bit less than that. And what that does is it creates more bounce and shallower. And the other video is her at same day, but we're at Lake Nona in Orlando, and she's chipping balls off the green. Now, not recommended unless you're very, very good. Now, she probably hit 30 balls off this green, and you could never, ever tell that there was a mark on it. So being able to create a shallow angle and a better ground interaction is so important if you want to become a good chipper. And again, the green represents on this the leading edge. So if you're hitting the green part on this wedge, the front edge, you're creating more of a dig. So that club, as it hits the ground, is designed to dig. If you're hitting the blue part, as it hits, it's hitting kind of on a flat surface with another flat surface. So it kind of just slides. You'll notice here that Jin Young Ko is hitting her ground interaction is, I would say, probably three inches. So she's touching the ground about 3 inches before she actually makes contact with the ball. So something that people always think that they think when they're chipping that they're hitting ball first, but generally we're always hitting a little bit of turf first. Now, I think this is just another one of Mo, and yeah, it's just a different angle from the green. She's just chipping it into the bag, but you can hear the contact, so perfect. Oh. She's holding that angle very nice.
Slow. Try and get it to stop quickly.
Okay. All right. So here's another player who's trying to create a little bit less shaft lean at impact. So the handle is actually leaned backwards so that we create a shallower angle of attack and don't necessarily take a divot. And that their shallower angle of attack allows the player to hit the ball a little bit higher. You can see the trajectory off this little shot here. So he's trying to pop it up onto the front there. So the handle position leaning backwards allows to create more loft at impact. It also creates more bounce, so then it's a little shallower coming through. This is a PGA Tour player. So again, when we're looking at ground interaction, we're looking at, setup, swing plane, weight distribution, club delivery, ball position, attack angle, dynamic, and lie. And so what I'm way more concerned about when I'm working with players is how are they contacting the ground? How is that contact and how's the club reacting whenever it hits the ground? So what we need to do is figure out how to use the bounce a little bit more on the club so that when it hits the ground, it has that kind of a sliding effect, that it's not kind of coming in and digging. This is another one here showing sort of where the club enters the ground and exits. And you can see there, obviously we're touching the ground before we actually hit the ball. I have a little board that I use. It's a little board. It's just got Velcro on it, and it goes one way and the other way. So it's a really cool thing to use, and it's got lines on it. So the lines represent where your club will hit. So if you're doing it with a player and you just get it's just a little board, with some Velcro on it, and it's really, really quite handy. this is a bad image. Sorry, it's squeezed like this here, but what we're doing here is we're showing they're all in like 1 inch increments. So what we're doing is we're showing if I were to hit, you know, a little bit behind the ball, a lot behind the ball, what would happen to the golf ball? So for here, you can see the thin shot would be just half an inch behind the ball. So if you hit half an inch behind the ball, it is likely that you might thin the shot. If you hit 1 inch behind the ball, that's quite close to it, and it will spin really nice. 2 inches sort of is kind of a perfect strike. So hitting the ground 2 inches behind the golf ball, and then obviously getting into further high spinner, and then even one that just doesn't spin as much as up to 4 to 5 inches. So, you know, if a golf ball is here, you can hit, you know, obviously 1, 2, 3, you know, 4. You can probably get away with 5, but you know, really a good strike is about 2 inches. A little more higher is about 3 inches behind. So these little boards, I should make these boards and sell them because they're great. But if you can make them at home, I sometimes put. I've got one that I also put a little bit a yoga mat, like a little bit of a yoga mat, and I cut it up and I put it under a little board, and then put the Velcro around and just staple it. And they're fantastic, and the feedback that you get with the players are really good. So I'll show you. I'll do one here. Oh, sorry, the video was a little high, but I'll be back in a second. So I just did one there. This is maybe you won't be able to see it there, but this is where I hit from, and I hit 1, 2, 3, 5 inches, 5 inches behind, and it was still pretty good strike. So the fact is that you do not have to hit the ball first when you're chipping. You actually would hit the ground first, use the bounce of the club. That's why our wedges are different, and that there allows us to make better contact. Here's another image. Jin Young Ko. Again, we're really paying attention to not creating any divots. This one here, she's a little bit more open with her feet line and the club face, just because there's not a lot of room on the green. So we're trying to sort of hit it up there and get it to stop. A little bit off the toe there, that takes a little bit of the smash off it, and you can see her holding the club face, trying to keep the spin on the ball so that when it hits the green, it's going to bite pretty good. So good little images to kind of refer back to there. She's excellent at this here, so it's a nice one. But again, no divot. You know, creating that there chipping area where people aren't taking huge chunks. You know, so if you can help your players not chunk or take divots when they're chipping, their chipping is going to go through the roof. It's going to be so good, and their confidence level as well. This is again talking about our low point, just making sure that we manage that low point. That's a skill that's kind of important for a lot of players. If you can teach them what low point is, they'll start to understand the relationship between their sternum and where the club bottoms out, and that there will allow them then to start making better contact more often. So a little bit about spin here. So I did this study a few years ago, and it just shows you the relationship between spin and strike location. So most of these shots were a 30-yard shot, and it shows obviously the more the strike is lower, the better the spin, the more it moves up the face, the vertical, the less spin it creates. Then obviously the heel was decent, creating some spin, and the toe starts to lose its spin as it moves further out onto the toe. But here's just looking one straight through the vertical. Club was delivered fairly similar, a little bit toe up, just to create that higher strike on that one. But the spin is reduced quite a bit. But the dynamics of the swing was pretty much exactly the same. A couple of things we talk about here with the backswing is if I'm trying to create a different shot, I will produce a different backswing. You can see here, she's trying to hit a little, a little runny shot here on the left. And you can see that club face there, a little bit on the shut side, creating a less spin, getting that ball to turn over. The other one here, you can see that face is pretty square, trying to launch it up a little bit more. And obviously you can go to an extreme and have that face even more open. But the swing is similar, a little more inside, maybe on the one on the way back, but then it changes on the release. So the face on the one on the left there is where we hold the face a little more open because we've opened, it's pretty neutral on the back. And then the one that's starting to close over here, getting that ball to bump. So you can create very different releases and different spins by just getting the club face closed or open on the backswing. This is just a fun one that I really liked. A young guy, Tom McKibben from Ireland, good player. He's on the Challenge Tour at the minute. And we're hitting shots out of divots. And I really wanted to talk more about the release here. So I'll try and play it here for me. So it's even a short swing, a lot of wrist. He's driving the heel in there, and look at the way he's holding the face open. And then this totally changes the energy of the golf ball. So now when it lands completely dead. So getting the ball to spin and stop from a divot. So not a big swing, but he's using the heel to dig underneath it and then letting that face stay way open. So it's a cool shot. And that's why we want to create variability in our players, because if the player doesn't know how to get to hold the club face, add loft, use the leading edge, create a steeper angle of attack, then they get into a situation and they just can't manage these shots. They just would not have a clue how to be able to do it. They wouldn't be able to manage it. I'm going to skip over this because we've got a lot more to still to cover and not a lot of time. So a little bit about adding bounce like we talked about before. If the club face is open, it'll add a little more bounce. Every 1 degree it's open adds 1 more degree of bounce. Now the problem is that as you start to as players start to open the club face, they will start to cut their shots. So generally it's just how the body works and how the brain works. With the face being open, we don't want the hosel coming in, so the player will start to cut the ball more. So the more you open the face, the more naturally you'll produce cut spin. And then the strike starts to go out onto, you can see I've drawn a 1 and a 2. So if you're going to open up your club face, technically you want to set the ball in the number 2 spot. So closer to the hosel, because the club is moving across the ball, that will bring the strike back into the middle of the face. Little thing that I do with a lot of my players, if you watch some of the TXG videos that I've done recently, the wedge matrix stuff. So I sell these products and I do it with the players. Oops. It's a little sticker that goes on the wedges and it allows me to build out. So we only do a half swing, a 3/4 swing, and a full swing. Those are the only 3 types of swing that we do. And then we get a series of numbers, and then the players are able to build out their wedges from those numbers, which is really, really helpful. And also a great lesson. And if you don't have TrackMans or anything, don't worry, just go buy some cheap cones. Just buy some cones, put them out on the range at different yardages, and you can kind of guess the distances there and still do this exercise. So, you know, obviously if you have a TrackMan or a Foresight or something, it's easier, but you don't need one to go out and do this. Obviously, as you start to get better at it, we can add in shaft lean, less shaft lean to take off 3 or 4 yards on either side. So if it's not quite the perfect number, we can do that there to add spin and take spin off as well too. So there's a little extra level to the wedge stuff, but I'm sorry, I got to hammer through some of this stuff here just because I've got a lot more to kind of cover. So I've been kind of dropping it in as we've been going through with the players that have the anxiety. So when you get players that really struggle with chipping and have a fear of chipping, and they just can't manage it, and I'm sure we've had those people coming in before to see us. A lot of times they don't know what they're doing, you know, and there are some technical things that I think they're doing wrong that's just making the process a lot worse. The other thing is that the memory box of what they're creating, you know, if you're a Vision 54 fan, that is, you're creating a memory loop that's basically linked to them failing. So they don't see any level of success. So the only thing that they're thinking about is failing or making a mistake, because that's what the memories have been created. Because it's supposed to be like, I think it's like a 3-to-1 ratio. So for every negative emotion or thing that you create, it takes 3 positives just to sort of have any type of baseline layered out there. So we've got to create a memory box of positive things that we're thinking about, and it might not even be positive outcomes. It could be about how they're moving the club. It could be anything in terms of something technical, something thought-based, that's going to allow them to start keep thinking about that. Because, you know, a lot of women will say that they can think about a lot of things and multitask and do something else. The truth is the brain doesn't work that way. You can only ever think about something and actually do it. You can't be thinking about multiple things at the same time and trying to execute. So if you're building a memory box of thoughts, you will, even if you're just bypassing some of the anxiety at the minute, that memory box is going to be good, because it won't allow the player to go back to some of the old behaviors and the old thoughts. So building a stronger memory box is really a great bypass tool until they start to get a little bit of confidence out. The self-talk is massively important, because if you walk up and you're telling yourself you're not going to hit the shot, you're not going to do it. And if you walk up telling yourself that you are going to hit the shot, there's higher likelihood you will. So we need to educate the players to make sure that they know that self-talk is going to impact their ability to perform. Now, obviously, technically and tactically, there's things that the player can do. You know, bump and run, take hybrids just to build up some of their confidence. But we still need to kind of work on some of those things. A lot of people say it works in practice, but not on the course. And we had talked about this before. We have to create a little bit more of a stressor, because what happens when they're in practice is that they are not stressed out enough in practice. And then when they go to the course, they just can't manage some of the other things. And the other things is that when they're there hitting golf balls, they're just there and they're not really thinking about it, and they're just kind of doing it, and their body responds. When they get to the golf course and they add all these extra thoughts, extra stimulus, they find it very difficult to manage it. So we need to now practice stress as much as we practice anything else, because if they can manage the stress and they're not changing as much when they get on the golf course, then the likelihood is that they'll perform a little bit better. And again, like we talked about before, that behavioral training, you know, set your behavior first. Whatever your behavior you want it to be, set that there as the tone for the training session, even though you're doing a whole bunch of other things. So if we're not going to go down the road of, you know, pity party or complaining about this or whatever, we're just going to set the behavior, do the training, set the behavior, do the training. We can discuss it afterwards. Oh, I felt this or felt that, you know, but I think you're there to train a behavior and a mindset. And if you train that behavior and mindset, it will start to carry forward. But if you keep defaulting every time you hit a bad shot and you go back, you create a bad loop, you know. So every time you hit a bad shot, that loop happens. So as soon as you get on the golf course and hit a bad shot, you've created that negative loop pattern, as opposed to if you've hit a bad shot, check your behavior, go back, hit another shot. Don't analyze it, don't think about it, just move forward. and that will allow the players to start to move in the right direction. But I think this setting your behavior is pretty key. So I've got a couple of videos here. I'm just going to show you. So the one on the left here is a very, very good player and hits it an absolute mile, but has a terrible short game. Absolutely terrible. This is one of the videos that I took of him, and you can see that the club is loading. The club is loading so much on his backswing. I gotta stop the other one here just because it's loading so much on the backswing. He's having to unload it, and you can see recock on the way through. So it's just not a good way to go about it. So when we're creating these bunker shots for players who are very, very strong, what we want to do is we want them to swing long and wide without any wrists, so that it creates a shallow angle coming through and allows them to hit the bunker shots a lot better. Because anytime you have that excessive wrist action for strong players, they can find it difficult. Now, if they've got great hands and they manage it, you leave it alone. But for me, with this player on the left here, I'd be trying to create no wrists at all for him in the bunker, and that's what we did. And it's a very different swing than his normal swing, but that's okay. The short game can be totally different to your actual normal swing. So again, the player that I have on the right here is good college player. Will be going to Alabama pretty soon. You can see we've leaned the handle back. This is another way that we can shallow it out. By leaning the handle backwards at address, we can create a little bit more of a release through the ball. So just doing it at setup helps us kind of get that outcome there. You see the handle leaning back there at address. So again, two different ways to create that. So one's created at setup, the other's created without using your wrists. So no wrists at all. Which can be kind of tricky for a lot of players. So again, we talk about versatility. So we have one player here. This is Emma Talley. She was the USAM champion, and she plays on the LPGA Tour. So this is just her creating a normal little shot, nice and shallow. And this is something that she's very good at, and a lot of girls are very good at. They're very one-dimensional, and they're very good at just doing the very basic thing. Now, the one on the right is where I had to teach her how to become steep, how to use the bounce, how to add loft, and then how to create spin. So, this can't play media. This is too bad, because it was a really really cool shot. Comes down on it, holds the face, comes up on the green, spins directly to the right. I'll see if I can get that one to play again, guys. But we're talking about the versatility in the short game and being able to do different things, you know, where before on the left, she could only ever do that kind of one thing, you know, that was all she kind of was good at doing. So we tried to go to the other end of the spectrum and make her do something completely crazy. This again, Jin Young Ko here. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure why the video isn't playing, but this was her trying to hit a high shot on the left. You can see body line open, club face open, and she just couldn't really hit a high shot. And then the one on the right, she's trying to hit it up here. She's fairly square to that. Everything's pretty square, but as she's swinging it back, she does it with her wrists. So she opens the club face with her wrists and her hands to create the loft, and then swings through normal, hits this nice big high shot. Sorry, I'm not sure why that one has let me down there. Again, this is Area Jutanagarn. One of the things that Area will struggle with is her finish position. So I'm not sure why this is. See if I can move it forward first. Oh. You might see it when you guys play it, but I think it might be with my internet or something here. Yeah, it might be, but when you go back and you review it, what you're going to notice is one swing is she's finishing kind of around her body, so instead of finishing up through here, she's finishing around, and she's getting a very low flat trajectory. So one of the things we did there was just getting those hands to finish up nice and high, and that started to get the launch of the golf ball up into the sky there. Again, if these don't work, I can just send them separately. And one more. So this is Moria on the left, and again, we're working on a shallow chip that releases. So ball positions up and hands are forward, and it's shallow, and then we're getting the ball to have no spin, a lot of top spin release. This is Jin Young here in the middle. We're practicing blading our chips. So again, variability, making sure that we have a lot of different options. This is a young player here on the right. She was one of the youngest players to ever play an LPGA event at 11 years old or 12 years old. And what we're working here is, this one's called, I'll have to send you this one. This one didn't pop up. It's called Max Loft, where we basically hit the ball as high as we can up in the air. Again, like we said, we got to push that envelope so that we're as far away, and then we kind of bring it in for the shots that we normally go about playing. So again, I think the key here is that we're not trying to create consistent players. We're trying to create players that can do so many different things. And then as they know how to do different things, they'll just go back and they'll default back to things that they're comfortable with. And because they're comfortable with them, they'll be able to execute them a lot better. And their execution goes up, their score gets better, and they perform better. I think if you only teach them one shot or two shots, then they can manage it, but I don't think you'll have the same success with it. So, questions?
Let's see.
A lot of info. I tried to hammer through as much as I could there.
Oh, no, there's another question. There's one comment talking about TXG, huge things for Ian and his crew today. Not sure what it means, but probably or. Yeah,
so TXG got bought out by Club Champion, which is another fitting company, and they will be taking over TXG, I guess. I was chatting to Ian last night. I was just texting with him. So I think he'll give me a call Friday and let me know some of the details of that there, but I don't know exactly what's going to be happening. I know that Matt, who works for TXG and does a lot of their videos and stuff, Matt's going to be working with me a lot now, doing a lot of video production stuff. So I'm looking forward to having him there to do that for me.
Couple of questions from me that came into mind. What's your kind of tour players versus kind of club level players with the clubs they use around the green? Is it only wedges, kind of like using one specific wedge and then having a couple of others, or what's your kind of preference there?
So I like the players to be well-rounded, like we talked about, to have a big variety of different shots. And then we always go back to their default is, what's the easiest shot that you possibly could play? Like if 60 degree is the easiest shot and we can prove it with the proximity numbers, then we will just get them to go back to that one club and chip with it. But in training, I will want them to do and use a lot of different clubs. But certainly when they're playing, I think it's just, I think it's fine to default to clubs that you like, because but only if we can prove that the numbers are better. Sometimes the player goes, oh, I only chip with my 60, but then I do a test with them and I'm proving that the 56 is better, and then they're like, oh, okay. So we have a narrow thought process sometimes, and we think that what we're doing is the correct answer, but we haven't based it on any studies or any actual testing.
What about kind of, you talked in the beginning about when testing, like using the tees, like where you land and where you want the ball to end. Do you think that it's important for players to kind of know where they're trying to land the ball? Because I do get some players coming up that they're like, where are you trying to land it? And I don't think about the landing area at all. I'll just watch and okay, how do you then kind of plan the shot or visualize? I can just feel it. But what's your thought on that? Is it mandatory to have a?
Yeah, so it's okay for the player to be that way and say, I don't really think about it, but it's not okay for us to be able to assess the situation if we don't have an idea of what they're trying to do. You know, so we need that feedback. So we need to ask them, hey, you need to show me where it is. It's okay if you want to play that way, but you need to at least train this way so that I know that you are proficient in hitting your landing spot where you're trying to and actually getting the ball to release, you know? And there are a lot of players that don't think about their landing spot. They just see it and they react. But what I would say is, like everything else, why wouldn't we be open to training so many different ways and then deciding what's the best way? You know, so don't be so narrow in their thinking, and allow themselves an opportunity to train a different way, because they might learn something from it that they didn't realize.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you mentioned impact location training with like rubber bands? Do you have any other kind of drills for that you use yourself that are your favorite drills for kind of moving the impact up or down or toe or heel?
Yeah, so I either get some spray, so I spray the club so that when it hits it, I use some impact tape, and then sometimes I'll use I'll just tape an object onto the face, high up on the face, a coin or a tee, so that they only are allowed to hit here, and if they hit up there, it'll smash the tee and the tee will pop off. So I often thought I need some type of training aid that I can stick on there that's got like a cutout, like a perfect cutout low on the face in that area. That would be really cool, that I could just slap it on a face and then hit that spot. But yeah, that's all I'm trying to do, is create that awareness. You know, player, because a lot of them, the truth is they don't know where they're striking on the face. They've no clue. So they don't know, if they don't know where it is, then it's hard for them to be able to create that spin.
Yeah, there's lots of talk about low point, but also kind of controlling the height of the low point. So so where you hit it on the face as well. So
massive, yeah, massive.
There's one question in the chat. Same shaft in all degree wedges?
No, I think I have a heavier one on my 50, and then it works a little bit lighter up from there. So I have a stiff in my 56, and then I have a regular, but like I said before, I'll probably go to something a little bit different. And it's only because my 56 for me, I don't really hit full swings for it. So I'm trying to hit something that's got more spin to it, and that because it's whippier, I can create more loft, you know, because the shaft will kick and naturally create a little bit more dynamic loft, which is good for me because it spins. I don't want that happening so much on my 56, because I want to flight my 56. And because I'm hitting more of a fuller shot, I don't really need to have the loft, adding loft to it as much. And then I think with my 50, it's kind of just like my normal clubs. So it's the only thing that I would do. I do go shorter in length. So I am about an inch, almost an inch shorter on my 60, and about a quarter inch shorter on my 56.
Okay.
Creates a lower flight for me. It's much more like penetrating. And it's just the way I like to hit the wedges. I don't like them ballooning as much.
Anything else? More questions? No, not in the chat.
I made everybody tired. Hi, that's good.
Lots of new information, and you mentioned that the links for the videos, they didn't play that well, but we'll send the presentation afterwards for you there, and the videos, there's links for the videos so people can check them out, and And we'll have an hour Q&A session. We don't have the date set yet, but we'll inform everybody soon as we get it set. And then if there's anything that pops in mind about this session or the last one, that the topics that we went through, there's lots of things that to cover more deeply and thoroughly. So if there's anybody who's interested in kind of going somewhere, just let us know. So then we can kind of plan for the possible next ones. So
yeah, no, it sounds great.
but thank you very much, Gareth, for your time. Really appreciate it. Lots of
Problem.
knowledge and things for us to kind of digest now. So
Yeah.
in the darkness and indoors. So hopefully.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming here. Much appreciated. And if anybody has anything they want to reach out to me to, go ahead, find my social, and send me a message if there's anything I can do to help you. But I'm looking forward to chatting to you for another hour and discussing a few more things. Like I said, if you have some questions, that's where we kind of want to go through some of that, because the reason we had suggested doing an extra hour afterward is because I think sometimes you get all this information and then you're like, well, what do I do with it? You know, and there's some follow-up that we kind of need. And I want to make sure that if there is something that we have an opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, and try these things at work and with yourself, and then it's kind of more approachable, and there's probably going to be more questions after trying these out. So
yeah, perfect.
Thank you a lot. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Take it, bye.